Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The Secretary General spoke to the 6th Annual Association of Southeast Asian Nations UN Summit, of which he is a co-chair, in Naypyidaw, Myanmar today. He told the leaders that the United Nations is striving to address the multiple crises the world is currently facing, while keeping its eyes on the longer-term challenges, such as climate change. The Secretary General said that discrimination against minorities and violence against women remain serious challenges in the region. But he noted that the United Nations stands ready to work with ASEAN to strengthen national capacities to promote human rights. The Secretary General then spoke at a press conference. In his remarks, he expressed his concern that historical tensions and competing territorial claims in the region could hold the region back. He said that he was encouraged by recent steps to enhance dialogue and hoped that this will prevent any needless escalation. He added that in Myanmar, the process of democratization is at a defining moment. An inclusive and transparent election next year will be crucial for the country's future. And he expressed his concern about the Rohingya population, who face discrimination and violence, and encouraged the leaders of Myanmar to uphold human rights, take a strong stance against incitement, and ensure humanitarian access to Rohingya living in vulnerable conditions. The Secretary General added that the world needs to do even more to address the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa. He added that the rate of new cases is showing encouraging signs of slowing in some of the hardest hit parts of Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. And we have his remarks in our office. In a statement we issued last night, the Secretary General commended the joint announcement by China and the United States of their post-2020 action on climate change as an important contribution to the new climate agreement to be reached next year in Paris. The Secretary General thanked President Xi Jinping and President Barack Obama for their personal commitment to work together to remove any impediments to reaching an agreement in Paris. He said that the leadership demonstrated by these two countries will give the international community an unprecedented chance to succeed at reaching a meaningful, universal agreement in 2015. The Secretary General urged all countries, especially all major economies, to follow China and the United States' lead and announce ambitious post-2020 targets as soon as possible, but no later than the first quarter of 2015. The full statement is available online and in our office. And you will have seen the statement we issued yesterday afternoon, which expressed the Secretary General's concern about the upsurge in violence and killings over the past few days in Israel and the West Bank. Violence only deepens distrust while making more distant the prospects for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The Secretary General calls on all sides to do everything they possibly can to avoid further exacerbating an already tense environment. His thoughts are with the families of the victims. The Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Hervé Latsus, briefed the Security Council this morning on the UN mission in Liberia, UNMIL, saying that we are no longer seeing signs that security could seriously deteriorate in the country heavily affected by Ebola. However, he said it would be appropriate to defer consideration of the drawdown of UN troops and police until the Ebola crisis is over. We have his remarks in our office. Meanwhile, Dr. David Nabarro, the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Ebola, gave this morning a briefing to non-governmental organizations here at headquarters. He expressed his admiration for those working on the front lines of the outbreak and stressed the major role that they are playing in awareness raising, fundraising, and making a difference on the ground. The event has been webcast and is available at webtv.un.org. And tomorrow, Dr. Nabarro and the head of the UN Mission for Ebola Emergency Response, Anthony Banbury, will brief the General Assembly on Ebola, and they will then be my guests at the noon briefing. Before a meeting on Liberia this morning, the Security Council passed a resolution on piracy off the coast of Somalia. This afternoon, the Council will hold an open meeting on Ukraine and will be briefed by Acting Assistant Secretary General for the Department of Political Affairs, Jens Toiberg-Franzen, and by representatives of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Following that meeting, the Council will hold consultations on Lebanon. It will be briefed by Derek Plumley, the UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, and he's expected to speak to reporters at the stakeout after that meeting. Opium poppy cultivation in Afghanistan rose 7% this year compared to 2013, from 209,000 hectares last year to 224,000 hectares now. That's according to the Afghanistan Opium Survey released today by the Afghan Ministry of Counter-Narcotics and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Meanwhile, opium production may potentially increase by 17%, with yields estimated to reach 6,400 tons in 2014, compared to the previous year's total of 5,500 tons. These increases come after record highs were recorded in 2013, when cultivation rose 36% and production by almost a half since 2012. The executive director of the Office on Drugs and Crime, Yuri Fedotov, said that Afghanistan's narcotics problem remain a global challenge and a shared responsibility. He said that we cannot afford to see the long-term stability of Afghanistan and the wider region derailed by the threat of opiates. The World Health Organization released today its recommendations on indoor air pollution. These recommendations highlight the dangers of burning fuels like unprocessed coal and kerosene in the home, and set targets for reducing emissions of health-damaging pollutants from domestic cook stoves, space heaters, and fuel-based lamps. An estimated 4.3 million people worldwide die every year from household air pollution emitted by rudimentary biomass and coal cook stoves. Millions also die each year from strokes, heart and pulmonary diseases, including pneumonia and lung cancer, caused by household air pollution. The World Health Organization stresses the need for a rapid scale-up in access to cleaner and more modern cooking and heating appliances, as well as lamps, especially in developing country homes. More on indoor air pollution is available on the organization's website. And that's it for me. Are there any questions? Yes, Abdul Hamid.
Yes, when Mr. Leon met with...
Microphone, please.
Narandino Leon met yesterday with the leader of the National Congress in Libya, Mr. Abu Sahmain, and there was a press conference, and the deputy of the General Counsel said in his remarks in the press conference that Mr. Leon had met with us as a recognition of the National Congress. It was, he said also that he endorses the sentence that published by the Constitutional Court, which is annulling the elections of June and, in fact, recognizing the older elections. So what is the comment of the Secretary?
Yes, the reaction is that we would deny that. Mr. Leon did meet with him as one of the many personalities he's meeting with. It did not confer any specific recognition to the Congress. And of course, we continue to work with the elected government and with the wider population of personalities, trying to bring a variety of stakeholders in Libya together and see what we can do, again, to restore the democratic and constitutional framework of the country. Yes, Anna.
Thank you, Farhan. I wanted to ask you about this government-sponsored sterilization campaign in India. As a result of that, quite recently, 11 women died and more than 70 are hospitalized and in critical condition. Well, some countries do this as a measure of population control. And for India, unfortunately, this shocking procedure, this shocking phenomenon is not new. And it sadly echoes with the heavy sterilization campaigns in 1970s during Indira Gandhi period, where her son Sanjay was responsible for countless, procedures and countless deaths as a result. Is UN going to react somehow to this? Because, for goodness sakes, these are not cats and dogs that are being neutered we're talking about. These are people, and there might be other measures to be taken, to help these people. And also, on another note, usually when people speak of sterilizations, we know for men it's vasectomy, for women it's tubal ligation. Well, in men's case, it's just a local little procedure. For women's case, it's a huge surgery, very complicated. But unfortunately, for some reason, in Syria, they perform that only on women. Isn't this a gender discrimination, in your opinion? Thank you.
These are actually complex medical issues. Ultimately, I think these are questions to be better addressed by the World Health Organization. We've seen these worrying reports out of India. We would need to get further details, of course, before we could comment. But ultimately, wherever these medical practices occur in the world, we want to make sure that all the authorities take the appropriate care to make sure that they're conducted in as safe and as sanitary a way as possible. That's the basic ground point. In terms of whether anything was done wrong at this stage, I believe this is a question that the authorities in India themselves are looking into, and we'll need to see what information they have. But any further comment would need to come from our colleagues in the World Health Organization, particularly on your latter question about the associated health risks with the different types of operations.
Can I say something else? Somehow I believe these are not just medical issues. These are direct attack on human rights and gender equality. Thank you.
Well, and I appreciate your point. And certainly we want to make sure that when governments pursue policies, including policies on family planning, that they make sure to respect the rights of all the population, including the rights of women. And that goes for the entire range of family planning and contraceptive services. Yes.
This is another WHO question. The Catholic Church in Kenya is encouraging women not to receive a WHO tetanus vaccine, the allegation being that it has a sterilizing agent within it. Can the SG vouch for the WHO tetanus initiative there and address these concerns?
Yes. In fact, I would just refer you, there's now a joint statement out from the World Health Organization and from UNICEF responding to these allegations. The World Health Organization and the UN Children's Fund expressed their deep concern about the misinformation circulating in the media on the quality of the tetanus toxoid vaccine in Kenya. These grave allegations are not backed up by evidence and risk negatively impacting national immunization programs for children and women. It goes on to say that WHO and UNICEF confirmed that the vaccines are safe and are procured from a pre-qualified manufacturer. This safety is assured through a three-pronged global testing system, and the vaccine has reached more than 130 million women with at least 2 doses in 52 countries. There's more in a press release if you're interested. Yes.
Sure. I want to ask about a couple of the things that the Secretary General has said in Myanmar, but first I was sort of expecting some kind of an update from UNIMID on what it's doing to update its press release on the alleged rapes in Tabet. And the reason I ask is that a range of political parties in Sudan have said that UNIMID, they believe, is not credible. They've planned a peaceful protest in front of the European Union mission or embassy in Khartoum, saying that the EU finances UNIMID, and that which has become a spokesman for the Sudanese government. So I'm wondering, since it was said and the council member said that evidence goes away, what's been done in the last, I guess, 24 hours or since your last update to actually act on this?
There's nothing much in the way of an update to say beyond what I said yesterday. Obviously, the UNIMID team has made very clear that the findings were inconclusive and need further investigation. UNIMID remains committed to this, and it will revert with any additional findings that might shed light on these allegations.
Can you understand why people would want to know whether they've actually done any further investigation in the last 24 hours, given that there are protests in Khartoum against UNIMID?
We're very much appreciative of that fact, and UNIMID is continuing with its work. If they have any further concrete details beyond those that we've already shared, we'll express those at that point.
And can I want to ask, I noticed that the Secretary General in his press conference there was asked about the Rohingya, and it was a lengthy answer, but the one thing I didn't understand is he seemed to say that it's entirely up to, from the UN's perspective, it's entirely up to the government who's eligible for citizenship. But if they're eligible, they should be treated equally with others. And I just wanted to know, does the UN have any view, what if the government said all Rohingya are not eligible? Or is the condition on eligibility being not identifying yourself as a Rohingya, is that acceptable? What is this eligibility on which he's deferring? What does it mean?
Well, what he actually said, of course, he said, I'm urging that the human rights and human dignity of people in Rakhine should be respected. He went on to say that whoever is eligible to be given citizenship, I think they should be given citizenship equal to Myanmar people without any discrimination. Then, for those people who may not meet that criteria, it's important that their human rights and human dignity must be fully protected. And by the way, he did also add that he will be meeting with President Thein Sein tomorrow, and he will take that issue up with him. If there's anything further from the readout of that meeting, we'll share it at that point.
And just one last thing on Myanmar. I noticed that there was I guess it was an inaudible question about freedom of expression there, but recently a journalist, Aung Naing, was killed while in military custody, and it's given rise to a lot of commentary from press freedom groups, and I just wonder, is the Secretary General aware of that case? What does he think it means for the current status of freedom of the press in Myanmar?
He is informed, and as you know, what he did say is that as the political reform process continues, he said, quote, I have been asking the leaders to fully guarantee the freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly is the basic principle of human rights enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. And so he will continue to try and push for guarantees of freedom of expression and freedom of assembly in the country. Yes, Matthew.
Hi, Farhan. I was a little late, so maybe you already commented on this, but there are reports that NATO confirms Russian troops are entering into Ukraine. Is this something the UN is aware of?
I don't have any comment on the NATO comments, but one thing I did mention is that the Security Council is holding an open meeting on Ukraine this afternoon. They'll receive a briefing by Jens Stoltenberg, and the Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Political Affairs. Yes, Abdul Hamid.
Thank you, Farhan. In fact, Amnesty International this morning issued a statement saying the destruction of communities on the Gaza border by the Egyptian army is not a solution to the insurgency in Sinai. The UN kept silent on that destruction of those communities who've been there for thousands of years. On the other hand, the Rafah crossing with Egypt had been totally closed for the last 4 weeks. The prices went up 400% in terms of energy. There are shortages of food items, medicine, because of the closure of the Rafah crossing with Egypt. There are many people who want to leave, students, sick people, foreigners. Yet the UN remains silent. As much as we welcome the UN criticism when they criticize Israel for the closure of its crossing with Gaza, but they've been silent about Egypt.
I've been saying repeatedly, in fact, just yesterday I said that we continue to urge for the opening of all transit points to commercial traffic, and that's as true for the crossing points through Egypt as it is for Israel. Similarly, yesterday I made clear, as Stefan Dujarric has made clear over the past weeks, that whatever security operations are conducted in the region have to take account of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Yes.
Sure. I wanted to ask, one is real world and one is sort of UN rules. Armenia is saying that Azerbaijan has shot down a helicopter belonging to the Nagorno-Karabakh government. People are saying this, if true, and Azerbaijan has said that they have shot down a helicopter, this would be the first such incident since 1994. So given how the potential volatility of that, is the UN aware of that? Is there anyone within DPA that works on that? I know there's a Minsk process, but what can the UN confirm and what do they think about it?
I don't have any confirmation for you. We'd need to be able to get some facts and details, but there's no confirmation that we have at present. Yes, in the back.
Thank you. Given the swelling number of refugees from Iraq and Syria, UNHCR yesterday called on Western nations to support with resettlement. Does the SG support these comments?
Yes, he does. He's been also calling for countries, including those particularly outside the region, to provide more assistance for the settlement of the refugees coming from Iraq and Syria. As you know, there have been many countries, such as Lebanon, who have faced an extremely large burden of refugees. In Lebanon, it's equivalent to about a quarter of the population in the country itself. So we want to see other countries take up more of the burden if possible, and the Secretary General has been pushing for that.
Yeah, just to follow up. Obviously, last year, the UN tried to implement a program in Europe that wasn't signed up to by certain European nations like the UK and France, a couple of others. Can the SG push for them to sign up to that program?
Well, in terms of the actual programs, this is something I believe that is in the hands of the High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Antonio Guterres. But yes, the Secretary General is encouraging countries to do as much as they can to allow for greater entry of refugees and migrants. Yes.
There was just a stakeout by Matthew Nimitz about the name issue, the FIROM name issue. And so I ended up, I guess I wonder, I know that the Secretary General said that there's a 5-year rule for UN officials, and one of the logics behind it was that it benefits decision-making to have people shuffled and sort of working on a new issue. So I wanted to know, it seems that it doesn't apply to that position. What positions does it not apply to any of the sort of special advisors or personal advisors? And if so, how does that fit in with the rationale of having the 5-year rule for actual UN staff members?
There is a 5-year rule that we try to honor as much as is possible. There are times when, because of specific circumstances, in other words, specific processes where one person has a particular expertise that's not easily transferable, that it might be a little bit longer. But as a general rule, the idea is throughout the system, everyone tries to do that.
Does the UN, who appoints Mr. Nimitz, think that there's being progress made on this issue of the FIROM name?
I just leave you to the comments that Mr. Nimitz himself made mere minutes ago. Have a good afternoon, everyone.